She took off her jacket, and the courtroom fell silent. Because the tattoo on her arm was proof of an operation the government swore never existed. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and if stories of hidden truths and silent warriors move you, make sure to subscribe. No one paid her much attention at first. She sat in the back of courtroom 6B, hair tied back, wearing a simple gray blazer over a black turtleneck. Not a lawyer, not press, and certainly not the defendant, just there. The prosecution team whispered her name once. Thalia Voss. It passed like a rumor, unconfirmed, unacknowledged, a ghost. But when Judge Halberd called for her testimony, something shifted. The defense attorney looked up sharply. The prosecution tried to stall, but the judge had already seen her name on a sealed document delivered that morning. "Miss Voss," he said, "please step forward." She stood with quiet precision and walked. To the stand, her steps unhurried, balanced, almost trained. The courtroom's attention followed her like a current. No one expected her to speak. But they all expected something, a twist, a break in the case. The defendant, a mid-level intelligence officer accused of orchestrating an unauthorized drone strike, looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. The bailiff handed her a Bible. She paused. "I don't swear on books," she said calmly, "but I affirm the truth." The judge blinked, but allowed it. "State your name for the record." "Thalia Voss." The silence grew heavier. She glanced at the jury, then at the defense, and finally fixed her gaze on the prosecution table. "I'm not here to defend or accuse. I'm here to correct the record." Gasps from the gallery. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we object to this witness." "Overruled," Judge Halberd said. "She was called by this court. Proceed." Thalia exhaled slowly. Then she did something no one expected. She took off her jacket. A murmur rippled through the room. There, on her left forearm, inked in faded black and red, was a tactical insignia surrounded by 5 stars and a broken arrow. One juror leaned forward. The defense attorney whispered, "My God, that's Ghost Wing." The term wasn't in any official record. No photos, no paper trail. Ghost Wing was military myth, a rumored unit formed for off-grid ops, so secretive even presidents denied their existence. And yet, the mark on Thalia's arm was unmistakable. The prosecutor's face turned pale. "This is absurd," he barked. "That tattoo proves nothing." Thalia raised her eyes. "It proves I was there." The room went still, because what she was about to say next would unravel everything the government had tried to bury for over 20 years, and she hadn't even opened her mouth yet. When Thalia finally spoke, her voice didn't shake. "In 1997, I was selected for a covert unit operating under Defense Directive Echo 11. The unit had no official name. Internally, we were labeled Ghost Wing." Judge Halberd leaned forward. "There is no Echo 11 directive on record." Thalia nodded. "There wouldn't be. It was buried 6 months after our final mission. We didn't wear uniforms. We didn't carry ID. And we were instructed to burn our dog tags if compromised." "The defense attorney spoke up. "Miss Voss, were you active during the Takar Valley incident in '98? Her expression didn't change. "I was the aerial lead. Operation name Silent Quarry. The asset was recovered at 0340 hours. We lost 2. The courtroom rustled. The prosecutor slammed his folder. "This is irrelevant. These operations have no bearing on the charges at hand." "That's where you're wrong," Thalia replied. "Because the man you're prosecuting was my commanding officer." A gasp broke from the jury box. Judge Halberd's gavel struck once. "Order," Thalia continued. "He didn't authorize the strike on civilians. He redirected a drone to eliminate a known defector who was about to leak Ghost Wing's existence to foreign intelligence." She paused. "He saved every agent still active in the field, including me." The courtroom was frozen. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. "You're saying the drone wasn't rogue?" the judge asked. "I'm saying it was a kill order issued, off record to protect national integrity. And someone," she looked at the prosecutor, "decided to clean house." There was a tremble in the air. Not fear. Reverence. Then, Thalia reached into her blazer pocket and laid a single item on the witness stand. A scorched, half-melted dog tag. She turned it over. The initials, EV. This belonged to the one man who never made it home. "We carry the weight of the dead, Your Honor, not the shame of the living." And just like that, the courtroom saw the case in a different light. Kandahar, 1999. The wind there didn't blow. It scraped. Dry, relentless, a whispering kind of fury that left dust in every fold of cloth, every breath, every crack of your skin. And for Ghost Wing, it was home. Thalia Voss stared through the cracked windshield of an unmarked transport truck as it crept through the narrow canyon pass, known locally as the Mouth. The operation was labeled Silent Quarry 2, an extraction run, no weapons in and out by nightfall. But Ghostwing never believed in the simplicity of any mission. Sitting beside her was Agent Elijah Vaughn, Evie, as his dog tag had read. The same tag she'd placed on the witness stand just days ago. In the dim green of the dashboard lights, he looked impossibly calm. "You ever think about what they'll say if we don't make it?" he asked, half smiling. Thalia hadn't blinked. "They won't say anything, because we don't exist." That was the deal with Ghostwing. No funerals, no flags. If you died, it was in silence. If you lived, it was in shadows. Back in the courtroom, her words echoed across marble and flesh alike. "You were there when Agent Vaughn died?" Judge Halbert asked, his tone softer now. "Yes," she said. "He died saving me." A beat. "I was injured during extraction. Our asset was compromised. The fallback point had been ambushed, and I took a round to the hip just before reaching the ridgeline. Vaughn went back, dragged me the last 300 meters under sniper fire. When the chopper came in hot, he shielded me with his body until the rotor wash lifted us out." Her voice didn't waver. But her fingers, folded in front of her, flexed once. "And the prosecutor's argument," she continued, "hinges on the idea that Colonel Denning ordered that drone strike for revenge. But Denning had been out of field command for over 5 years. His only remaining loyalty was to us, and to Eli." She turned her gaze on the jury. "If he hadn't authorized that strike, the asset would have leaked our location. I wouldn't be sitting here. None of us would." The gallery was still. From the back, someone coughed. A juror shifted in his seat. But the mood had changed. "What was the asset carrying?" the defense lawyer asked quietly. Thalia's eyes hardened. "A hard drive. With footage of Ghostwing, a mission in the caves near Spin Boldak. It showed Eli executing a local informant who'd led 6 of our agents into a trap. The kind of footage that, if leaked, would have collapsed every covert protocol. The agency had spent a decade building." The prosecutor sprang to his feet. "That's speculation. She's claiming video evidence, yet no such video has been submitted to this court." Thalia reached into her briefcase and produced a single flash drive. "I didn't come to speculate," she said. "I came to testify." The room froze. The judge motioned for the bailiff. "We'll recess for 20 minutes, he announced, voice tight. But as Thalia was escorted out of the courtroom, her eyes passed briefly over the defendant, Colonel Denning, who hadn't moved since she began. He gave her the smallest of nods, not of gratitude, of recognition, and maybe warning. Because what lay ahead was not just the truth. It was classified, and Thalia Voss had just torn the seal wide open. Sometimes the truth isn't buried. It's redacted so thoroughly, even the paper forgets it ever existed. That's what Colonel Denning had once told Thalia years ago, in the underground debrief chamber beneath Langley. And as the courtroom, lights dimmed for recess, that same sentence rang in her mind like an old transmission, finally replaying itself. 20 minutes later, court resumed. The flash drive she had handed over had been examined, under strict security, inside a sealed chamber. Only the judge, 2 cybersecurity officers, and the court's chief of evidence had been allowed to view it. When Judge Halberd returned, his face was different. Still stone, but carved by knowledge now. "This witness may proceed," he said gravely. "With full protection, under Executive Transparency Protocol 41B. A low gasp, because that protocol wasn't just rare, it was legendary. Reserved only for whistleblowers whose testimonies could alter federal case law or ignite political crisis. Thalia stood, silent as always, but now every word would be officially recorded under protected clearance. Operation Lost Echo, she began, was never supposed to happen. The courtroom leaned in. It was 2003. NATO had just lost a listening post north of Herat. Our team was sent not to recover it, but to destroy the remaining tech before enemy forces reverse-engineered it. What they didn't tell us, until... We were boots down. Was that a secondary asset was in play? She paused. A 12-year-old boy, the son of a defected engineer. He had memorized key sequences that, if decoded, would give access to 4 allied intelligence networks. Someone exhaled loudly. We were ordered to retrieve him alive, but the mission went sideways. Half our unit never made it past the first ridge. Enemy forces ambushed us with drone recon, drones that were supposed to be ours. They'd been reverse-hacked. She looked down briefly. Colonel Denning, despite protocol, stayed on comms. He rerouted us through a collapsed irrigation tunnel. We got the boy, we got out, but when command realized what Denning had done, disobeying stand-down orders, they scrubbed the op. The defense attorney nodded. So Denning's record shows no such mission? Correct. Because it was lost. Buried in language so vague, you'd think we'd been moving furniture instead of saving an asset with NATO-level clearance access. The prosecutor stood again. And you expect us to believe this, based on memory? Thalia didn't blink. No, she said. She lifted her pant leg slightly, revealing a scar that ran from shin to knee, curved like a serpent. The boy bit me. When I carried him on my back, bleeding, terrified, he panicked. Took a piece of my leg with him. The courtroom was so silent, you could hear the camera shutter click from the press booth. Do you know what he said, as the evac lifted us out? The judge nodded. Thalia's voice dropped to a whisper. Your country lies better than ours. She paused. And I still brought him home. The jury was no longer just listening. They were watching history unfold, because for the first time, Denning's actions weren't the desperate orders of a rogue officer. They were the scars of a forgotten war, and Thalia was holding the receipts. The courtroom was adjourned early that evening, not because of chaos, but because the air had shifted. Every word Thalia spoke unraveled another thread from the blanket of silence that had covered Ghostwing for decades. But what no one in that courtroom knew was that Thalia hadn't come only to protect Colonel Denning. She had come to honor a final request, and it had been waiting in a sealed envelope for 15 years. Back in her apartment, 3 flights up, metal door, no nameplate, she kept a lockbox under the floorboards. No digital files, no backups. Just memories on paper. Inside, beneath old photos and a rusted sidearm, was a folded letter. Yellowing edges. Stamped with the insignia of a unit that didn't exist. She unfolded it that night. Thalia, if they come for me, don't waste your breath defending my record. Defend the truth. Ghostwing was never about medals. We weren't ghosts because we were invisible. We were ghosts because we carried things no living soul should have to carry. But if you ever get the chance, tell them about the boy. Tell them about Spin Boldak. Tell them about the decisions we made when nobody was watching. And, if you must testify, don't show them wounds. Show them the weight. You were the best of us. She had memorized every word years ago. But reading it now, after everything, It felt heavier. The next morning, courtroom 6B was full before sunrise. The media had caught wind of Ghost Wing, and a dozen network vans swarmed the parking lot. But inside, the silence remained respectful. For now, the story was still too sacred to spin. Judge Halberd addressed the room. "Miss Voss, you've presented unprecedented claims under sworn testimony. If you have further documentation, this is your final opportunity to submit it." Thalia nodded. She didn't reach for a file. Instead, she stepped forward and placed the folded letter on the judge's bench. This was written by Colonel Denning. Before his reassignment in 2008, I received it in a dead drop in Hamburg 2 months later. The prosecutor rolled his eyes. "We have no way to verify that. Except the handwriting matches a field briefing from Operation Silent Quarry, which I've already submitted." Halberd turned to the court archivist, who nodded after cross-referencing. The defense lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this letter supports the Colonel's state of mind, his intentions, and the classified context behind the alleged misconduct. We request all charges be re-evaluated under Section 73 of Military Code Reconciliation." It was a long shot, but it wasn't baseless. Thalia turned to the jury. "You were asked to judge a man based on a headline, a sanitized list of accusations, with none of the ghosts attached. But that's not justice, that's theater." She paused. "We all serve in different ways. Some hold rifles, some hold silence. Denning held both, and he never dropped either." The courtroom didn't clap. It didn't cheer, but something far stronger settled over the room. Belief. For the first time since the trial began, someone had spoken, not for attention, not for revenge, but for clarity. Thalia looked at the judge. "I rest, Your Honor, Judge." Halberd nodded once. "We'll reconvene tomorrow for the jury's decision." As Thalia walked back to her seat, Denning raised his eyes for the first time in days. He mouthed one word: "Thanks." The courtroom felt colder the next day. Maybe it was the early rainstorm drumming against the windows. Maybe it was the tension wrapped around each juror's spine. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because the walls of secrecy had finally begun to crack, and everyone was scared of what else might come through. Thalia Voss sat in the gallery, hands folded, eyes steady. The folded letter had been entered into evidence. Her flash drive testimony was now archived under classified federal seal. And Colonel Denning, still stone-faced, but not defeated, just waiting. Judge Halberd entered at exactly 9 a.m., flanked by 2 federal marshals, a protocol reserved only for cases that threatened national security optics. That alone told the press everything they needed to know. This wasn't just a trial. It was a referendum on forgotten wars and invisible warriors. "The jury has reached a decision," the bailiff announced. 12 men and women filed in. Faces, pale, lips pressed tight. One held the envelope that would decide the future of a man who had, until this trial, existed only as a whisper among shadows. On the charge of unauthorized drone deployment in a civilian zone. A pause. "We find the defendant, Colonel Everett Denning, not guilty." Gasps. A camera flash. 2 reporters jumped up, only to be hushed by the judge's gavel. Order. The second count was read. Then the third. Not guilty. Not guilty. Denning didn't flinch. Not once. But Thalia caught it. The almost imperceptible clench in his jaw, the twitch in the corner of his right eye. He wasn't relieved. He was remembering, and the memory wasn't finished with him yet. After the gavel fell and the court adjourned, Judge Halberd made one last, unexpected motion. In light of testimony and evidence entered under Executive Protocol 41B, this court formally recommends the reopening of Ghost Wing's operational record for congressional review. The press exploded. So did Thalia's heart. Because finally, they wouldn't just be ghosts anymore. Outside the courthouse, rain still fell, light and rhythmic. Colonel Denning walked under an umbrella held by his lawyer, passing reporters, who shouted his name, his rank, his sins, his redemption. But he didn't answer. He only stopped once, when Thalia stepped out from the marble columns. No umbrella. Just her, soaked to the collarbones, eyes locked on his. He handed her something. A USB drive, not labeled, no markings. Langley doesn't want this in archives, he said, but it belongs to someone who remembers what silence costs. She nodded. What's on it? He shrugged. The part they didn't let us tell. Maybe one day you will. Thalia tucked it in her jacket. They didn't say goodbye. Ghosts rarely do. Thalia sat alone in the back corner of her apartment, the rain having slowed to a quiet hiss against the windows. The USB drive rested on the table like a ticking clock. No label, no encryption warning, no metadata trail, just matte black plastic that looked as old as the secrets it carried. She slid it into her secure laptop. A single file appeared. Echo Protocol, Show 312 Voss, her name, her old call sign, and a date that sent ice down her spine, March 12, 2003. She clicked. The video flickered to life. Grainy, dust in the lens, military helmet cam. It wasn't hers, it was Denning's. In the feed, she saw herself, 20 years, younger, sprinting behind a crumbled wall in Herat, blood soaking her left sleeve. Her weapon jammed. And there, clutched in her arms, a terrified boy. Wide eyes, breathing like a rabbit caught in barbed wire. Stay with me, her younger voice said. Just 10 more feet. A mortar shell landed 4 meters away. The screen shook. She watched as Denning appeared, dragging her behind a half-buried Jeep chassis. He took a hit in the shoulder and didn't even flinch. Get him out, he ordered. But, her voice protested. That's an order, Voss. The feed cut. Then it switched to still photos, satellite maps, a debrief transcript, her own handwriting, and, finally, a memo to Intelligence Oversight Command from Lieutenant Call Everett Denning. Subject Echo 5 Assessment. Agent Voss showed decisive judgment under fire. Refused exfil until civilian asset was secured. I strongly recommend immediate clearance. Level upgrade. If this file is ever reviewed under duress, let it be known. She didn't just follow orders. She saved the mission. She stared at the words, stunned. This file wasn't just classified. It had been erased. Her name had never been attached to the official debrief until now. The next morning, she walked into the Department of Defense Records office in Arlington. She didn't have an appointment. She didn't need one. At the front desk, she handed the USB to a woman in a gray suit. This needs to go to Congressional Archives, under Echo Protocol. The woman blinked. I'm sorry. Echo Protocol hasn't been active since 2004. I know, Thalia said, but it's alive again. Security appeared a moment later. Not to stop her, but to escort her. 2 agents walked her through 3 checkpoints and into a room where the wall bore no name. Inside, a man in a dark vest leaned forward. You're here about Ghostwing? No, Thalia replied. I'm here about truth. She placed the drive on the table. If the truth is going to die, she said calmly, it should at least die with a witness. The man didn't smile. He pressed record. Begin. Thalia Voss stood still, facing the memorial wall at Arlington, under a pale morning sky. Her fingers clutched the folded triangle of cotton that had outlived every command she'd taken, every file she'd signed, and every man who ever called. Her Echo 5. Her father's flag, the one that started it all. 3 weeks had passed since the tribunal dropped all charges against Colonel Denning. But the real victory came quietly, off camera, buried in procedural memos and silent acknowledgments. Ghostwing's records had been reopened, and Thalia's name, once redacted from history, had been restored to the roster. She hadn't asked for it. She never did. Across the street, an old man in a brown coat approached with slow, deliberate steps. He stopped beside her, watching the flag in her hands. "Monroe," he said. "That your father?" Thalia nodded. "KIA in Kandahar, 2004. The man gave a slow breath, the kind that came from lungs trained on deserts and dust. "He served with honor." "You knew him?" The man didn't answer. He just pulled out a worn patch, fabric bleached from sun and time, a unit crest, Ghost Wing. He handed it to her. "He saved my boy's unit from a hot zone back in '03. I was never able to thank him." Thalia stared at the patch, then back at the man. "Why now?" "Because someone finally said it out loud. Someone reminded this country who keeps it standing. She didn't know whether to salute or cry, so she did neither. She just tucked the patch beside the folded flag." Later that day, Thalia entered the War Records Hall in D.C., a vast chamber of names, medals, missions, and lost histories. She approached a newly installed glass case. Inside, her father's photo, and a citation once removed from the archive, now restored. Beside it, a quote engraved on a brass plaque: "The loudest legacy is often the one whispered in silence." Captain A. Monroe Thalia placed her badge, Echo 5, into the display tray. She didn't need it anymore. Not because she'd given up the fight, because the fight had finally heard her. As she stepped outside, reporters were still buzzing across the street. "Miss Voss, can we ask, do you believe the government owes you an apology? Is this the beginning of more revelations?" She paused and smiled. "I'm not here for apologies," she said. "I'm here to remember." Camera clicked. A microphone dropped. And Thalia Voss, once a forgotten whisper in a system of secrets, walked away, carrying the only legacy that ever mattered, her father's flag, and the truth. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice helps keep these stories alive.